All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Discovering Multifamily podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Scandariato with Red Knight Properties. And today we have a special guest here with us, Dwaine Clarke, who is the founder and managing partner of the Passive Investors Club, which is a community of investors who are looking to build wealth, collect passive income in commercial investment properties. But he has a specific niche of the net lease space. So Dwaine will explain what net lease actually is, and he focuses on it via the syndication style. So by syndication, we mean pooling a group of resources together. Typically, it's financial resources to acquire bigger properties. He's also got his own podcast too, so I'd highly recommend you check it out. And he could talk about that towards the end of the show. So Dwaine, thank you so much for coming on.
I really appreciate it, Anthony. I really appreciate it and look forward to having this discussion.
Sure. So we deal with a lot of multifamily syndications at my company and my firm and what I'm used to. So can you talk to us about net lease syndications a little bit? How is it different? What is it exactly? Let's get into it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you being in the multifamily space, probably, all of your listeners, that's just kind of like like a common thing where people just naturally progress into when they think about real estate as they get out of the single tenant side. For me, getting into single tenant net lease, because I started out like many, kind of starting small with fix and flip properties, small rental properties, and eventually I met a investor that was also my client that owned a Walgreens pharmacy property. And at that time, I had no idea that, I thought Walgreens owned everything. They used to see them in every single corner in every single neighborhood. But he was actually the landlord of this property. So I asked him, like, how did you do it? He said, it's no different than me owning this apartment building down the street, which I do own. He said, this with these companies, usually they're larger. They're not in the business of being in real estate. They're in the business of operating their business. And for this particular instance, Walgreens, pharmaceuticals, getting care and all that stuff that we need, that we do in each and every day. So from that point on, I started to learn everything about that because I was really intrigued by the lifestyle that he lived. Of course, along with a very balanced portfolio of different investment asset classes, he was just able to just kind of live this kind of, they call this lifestyle, passive lifestyle type of living. And I was really intrigued by it because coming from when I started out fix and flipping, I was in, a lot of rehab projects with contractors to 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was really getting burned out, even though I was a single guy, had a lot of energy and, still in the social scene. So I didn't mind too much. But, later down the line, I wanted to kind of start something new, start a family, and eventually form investments around my lifestyle. So kind of mirroring about his success and, how he, taught me, I, went out to kind of learn everything about that. I was also a broker at the time. So I had the ability to, find these types of investments. And so I utilize focusing all of my attention on this particular niche to find investors that are like-minded like him to buy these things. And then my goal was to just build up as much cash as possible from these transactions for my commissions to eventually doing what he was doing by buying these Walgreens pharmacies. And finally mirrored the two with the syndication model and investments into net lease and kind of merge the two so I can have a way to get into it without having to raise millions of dollars of my own cash. But for people who are not familiar with this particular niche, single tenant net lease, it's a freestanding commercial office industrial building that occupies the whole space. So, the example of a Walgreens, they're the only tenant. So you don't have, another multiple different tenants that's occupying this space. So it's one tenant, and they call absolute triple net lease, which is the kind of the contract agreement with the tenant, is the tenant is responsible for all of the bills associated with the property. And that's a really great thing because I know with you on the multifamily side, you have a property manager, your asset manager, you have, contracting, you have all these different elements to operate the real estate. But with this particular asset class, the tenant takes care of everything, which includes taxes, insurance, maintenance, CAM charges, maintenance, you name it. And you can really just be a hands-off investor and just collect the checks. And it's great coupled it with a great brand name investment grade tenant like a Walgreens caliber, which is like a triple B S&P credit grade tenant. you have a pretty good assurance that they're actually going to pay you every single month on time. So all of that, those elements was very attractive to me. And then we just find other like-minded individuals who want this type of investment, and we bring them together and we buy and invest together in different syndication models. So that's kind of like my start and kind of a general overview about, net lease and what it is.
Excellent. No, that's a great overview of it. Can you talk about the risk profiles a little bit? You mentioned Walgreens and the credit rating that Walgreens has and probably still will maintain, or if not, increase over time, and how it's relative to the risk of multifamily. Like you mentioned, multifamily is more management intensive, and pretty much every single way. When you're looking at the risk adjusted
Mhm.
returns, what would you say the delta is? It doesn't, on a cash on cash basis, IRR basis, multiple basis, when you're looking at these projects, the net lease versus the multifamily, let's say value add multifamily over a 5 year, even 7 year investment horizon. What's like maybe the different, what's more the archetype investor for multifamily versus the net lease?
Yeah, so it's they kind of have different types of flavors. So the type of people who would invest in a net lease is more capital preservation play, long-term cash flow, not a more of aggressive growth compared to like a value add multifamily where you can force appreciation with like a long-term lease, net lease. It's 10, usually sometimes 25 years or more in the lease, and it's set. You can't play around with the lease compared to an apartment where you can watch the market and be able to increase market based off the conditions and really have more control there. You also, with the multifamily side, have a lot of benefits of having the economies of scale. And if you have one or two tenants leave, you can replace them, fix up the unit, and if it's undervalued, you can increase the rent compared to you have one tenant. And if they go belly up, and sometimes that happens, especially now, that's been a big concern during COVID, where some of the the casual dining sector was extremely hit because they just had no actual dining area that they can bring people in, or they had 50% or more capacity levels that really restricted them. So it really comes down to if you choosing a specific sub niche of net lease to kind of be on the safer side. But overall, we've really seen a big test in all of the sectors to see which one kind of fared out better. But yeah, and then other than you had mentioned kind of the return matrix, like a lot of the leases that we favor will have built-in rental increases over time. So for example, like McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, they usually have a 10% rental increase every 5 years. So kind of a nice hedge against inflation. And then overall, you can kind of build growth. So that's a good thing, compared to apartments where you can, change that, annually or whenever the tenant leaves. So so it depends on the type of investment that you look for. Us in our business model, we love net lease, we love apartments, we love self storage. We're like a diverse, we love diversity. So net lease is a part of our portfolio. It's not kind of like an exclusive thing. But then I deal with a lot of older investors that just said, I just want a 20-year lease. It's going to pay me $180,000 in rent, and they're 100% happy with that. And then once they're done with that, their asset, if maybe they retire or they pass on, they usually pass these properties on to their heirs who are not skilled or have the capacity to learn about real estate, and they can just easily just absorb this asset class and just get the benefits without having to learn the stuff about multifamily and networking with brokers and all this stuff and learning about the different markets. So it has many different benefits. So it really comes down to your comfort level, your goals as an investor, and then from there you can kind of go backwards to see how it would fit in your particular portfolio.
Great. I think it's interesting niche because the syndication, at least from the multifamily side, the investors are usually relying, the limited partners are usually relying on the general partners, which are directing the deal. In the case of net lease, the general partner is, they're still doing a lot of work, putting the deal together, getting the debt
Hmm.
together, finding the deal. It's still a lot of work, but it's at least moving forward. It's not as much work as the multifamily for
Exactly,
sure.
exactly.
So I guess the question would be, is, I kind of answered my own question, but why wouldn't someone just go find a Walgreens instead of partnering with the group? I guess the answer is probably twofold. Number one, they might not know where to
Mhm.
find it or even want to take the risk themselves, right? And number two, still want to have a good manager to oversee it.
Mhm.
Is there anything else you
Exactly.
can add to that?
Yeah, and plus, there's a big, I mean, there's a little difference in the return profile as well. I mean, with apartments, you're looking at a little bit more, in place, compared to where the net lease. I mean, right now, the net lease industry overall has been extremely strong. Cap rates haven't fluctuated. The only benefit is that we have lower interest rates on the debt side. But for we sold like a 7-Eleven gas station in Houston last month, and it was a 4 cap. That for a lot of people, that's not really attractive to them, compared to you getting 8% on apartment building and in Columbus, Ohio, or something of that sort. So it comes down to kind of what you want. I sometimes get a lot of investors call me and say, I love a 20-year CVS pharmacy with all of this stuff, and I said, well, what type of cash flow you're looking for? And then I'll say, oh, I want this. I said, if we do the math, then that comes out to like a 10 cap. I said, there's nothing in the net lease industry would match. You're best off investing in a syndication or a different asset class, with a sponsor that can, kind of get you those returns for you. So it really comes down to like the investors' expectations and then kind of lining their interests up to a different asset class that fits best in their comfort level.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned 7-Eleven. Are there any other, we call it essential retailers? Is that really what you're
Oh yeah, yep.
investing in? Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so you have the central retailers, and one thing I'm really big on that I talked about is, a tenant that wouldn't be affected by, e-commerce. So, Amazon comes in and kind of wipes out a lot of, different industries, like the clothing and maybe like bedding and all the different types of stuff and electronics. So we like the stuff that is essential, that people shop, eat, and do stuff at each and every day. Like a Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, fast food. Like a O'Reilly's Auto Parts or stuff like that, where it's something that it's always within need. And then if you couple that with a good strong tenant, regional or investment grade level, then that also kind of gives a little bit more safety and security. And also, like you do as well on the multifamily side, is real estate location. It all matters. We look at all of the demographic matrix, household income. How many people are within 1, 3, and 5 miles of the site? Is visibility? How much traffic counts come before it? Is it a hard corner location? So we look at from like an intrinsical value, but also we look at it from a larger play as well with the credit, because then you have corporate level, then you have franchise level, then you have like regional, and then you have mom and pop level, and those can vary into the types of returns that the property can spin off for you. So we look at it on a lot of different bases, and probably as much work as someone will buy a multifamily, even though we're dealing with one tenant. But we want to make sure that all of the metrics look right for a long-term success, because we're dealing with one tenant. So you have to kind of look a little bit more with the lens.
Excellent. And people can find out more on net lease investing. Your podcast is Wealth Through Real Estate Investing. And then do you have two podcasts or is
Oh,
it
well,
one?
yeah. One is called Wealth Through Real Estate Investing, and so I have the pleasure of talking to guys like yourself and other different people in many different niches. So I like just kind of giving kind of a lot of flavor so people can kind of learn about stuff. But we also talk about with my clients, because I have my secondary business that deals on the investment brokerage, kind of educating people on the net lease investing, and just keeping up on that sector if that's something they also want to sprinkle some of their investment dollars into as well. So we just kind of, just get as much information out there just so people are, up to speed, and just like you're doing as well.
Excellent. So I encourage everyone to check that out. And how can people find you best, Dwaine?
Absolutely. So yeah, we have if you're interested in learning more about like net lease investing, you want to like look at what's out there in the market, just have this overall discussion like, hey, this is what I was thinking. We can kind of strategize together as by nnproperties.com. And then also people who wants to that may not have the types of dollars to get into a property on their own, that want to join into a syndication. We look at a lot of we work with a lot of net lease sponsors. Then you can talk to us at passiveinvestorsclub.com.
Great. So we'll have a link to the Passive Investors Club website as well as Dwaine's 2 podcasts. So definitely would encourage you to check it out. And also, if you liked what you heard and or saw today on the show, please give us a rating and review on iTunes so Dwaine and my message can get out to a greater audience. And definitely encourage you to reach out to Dwaine. And Dwaine, hope to have you on my show again in the next year, see where you're at.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, it was really a lot of fun. Yeah, the love connecting with other investors, and like I said, love getting this message out to the people. So I appreciate that.
Excellent. Thank you.